And we're live.
Hello, everybody. So we have today debate. I don't know, introduce in this way. In the right side, we have a Zach Tag. Uh, for he's going to advocate for what? Uh,
Anarcho-capitalism.
okay. So in another side, we have a hydrogen ion.
Yes.
So he's
Arg
going to oppose.
for regulated capitalism, yes.
Ar-
So my first question is, so who's gonna start? Who I'm going to? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I can start.
yeah,
So
that's
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All
I
right.
believe in regulated. Uh,
In my opinion, when it comes to the anarcho capitalism, yeah, they think that regulating market uh, in any sphere is kind of degenerate, making it worse uh, when it comes to the anything, right? So why do you think regulated market, for instance, is better than open market? Like, I mean, why regulation should to be there?
yeah, that's a good question. So first, I would say the wealthiest countries in the world right now, if you look at them, all have a regulated economy. Uh, I would actually want to ask Zach, do you think there are any ANCAP countries in the world? Because I'm not sure if there are. For example, the United States is currently the richest country in the world. We have lots of regulation in healthcare and healthcare, especially, we have very regulated banks. We have regulation in almost all of the economy. Maybe a little too much in some areas, maybe not enough in some other areas. But the point is, the wealthiest countries in the world, I have plenty of historical evidence. The wealthiest countries in the world are capitalist and they have a regulated economy.
well, to answer your
So,
question, no, I don't think there are any purely ANCAP countries in the world today.
for Zach and Tag, I think if we start a question, right? So we can link these questions and you know and go through the loop to asking the questions. I mean, if you go deeper and deeper to this question, in my opinion, we can find out which side is more right. Okay,
Okay?
so when you say that regulated market is bad, right? Not in I mean in any system, in any system, if there is no if there is no regulation, if there is no one person with the, I don't know, with the power, who has a kind of a right to punish others, right? uh, there is going to be problems such as, you know in the US, there is a big problem called healthcare, right? And it's like it's kind of a anarcho-capitalism, because if you look at the other countries in the world, they don't have a free healthcare system. Just for instance, in South Korea, they don't have a free healthcare system, but they have a coupe system, right? But you
Yeah,
pay
yes.
some amount of money, but most of the time it covers most of the cases, but it's not harsh. But if you look at the U.S., the system is so getting harsh. People are not able to curb themselves, and sometimes the market gets crazy. How do you think? What can anarcho-capitalism give to the healthcare system that it will be adequate to all people? I mean, not, yeah, for all people, or the people who works, or the people who do things.
Well, I think if you want to look at a healthcare model, let's look at Switzerland. Okay, Switzerland has a purely market healthcare system. There's no socialized medicine. Everything's done through insurance. People pay privately, and they have some of the best healthcare results in the world. If you look at another example, Canada, which is my country, it's a system of socialized medical insurance. There's extremely onerous regulations in place that make private healthcare very difficult to exist, and the result is we have one of the worst performing healthcare systems among OECD nations. So I don't think that socialized medicine is necessarily better than a market based system like the Swiss have.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So,
yes. Just to respond to that really quickly. Yeah, I just Googled Switzerland healthcare system, and actually, I'm quoting from a webpage right now. It says the system is funded through enrollee premiums and taxes. So it's not necessarily anarcho-capitalist if the government is still taxing people and redistributing that money, or even
Right. It's
not
it's not a
redistributing that
it's not
money,
an
forcing people to pay.
anarcho-capitalist system, but it is a purely market one. They have subsidies for the poor, but those subsidies go to buy the poor healthcare insurance as opposed to having government-run hospitals.
All right.
uh, one additional question for you, Zach Attack. So, the problem is nowadays we have a lot of problem like overpopulation of the urban places, like cities and towns, right? But there is a problem that most of the villages and sometimes when it comes to the some villages or some big cities even like I don't know. There is a case called Michigan, right? What was the car factory where there was a big car factory and then they relocated to China and this city become one of the most crucial place. There's a lot of social problems and so on.
You're talking
When it
about
comes to
Flint.
the Michigan. Sorry, is
Flint,
that
Michigan.
Michigan?
Flint was the city.
Yeah. So
Yes, Flint,
uh,
Michigan.
yeah. So what the problem is, if you say if you against the government hospitals, how you gonna provide just a good healthcare system for just say villages, or do you think that villages should not be exist?
Well, look, if you're against the government nationalizing the food supply, how are you going to make sure that people eat? You don't have to. People buy their own
Yeah.
food, right? Grocery stores.
I yes, I do want to respond to that just really quickly and say that's not necessarily analogous, and I'll actually tell you why. So when you go to shop around, I'm putting that in quotation marks for medical care. You and me, I assume you're not a doctor. We don't really know what's going on that much. When you go to the store, you have a choice between two different loaves of bread. Well, if you choose the wrong loaf of bread, it's probably not going to kill you, which actually may partially be because of government regulation. Now, in that case, it almost certainly isn't. But the point is, it's a lot easier to be informed about your food than it is about your healthcare. If I go in and I go to a surgery, if they ask me which anesthetic should they use for me, how do I make that decision? It's a lot different than saying, "Oh, what soup do I want to buy at the grocery store?"
What do you think, Zach? You can answer. So if you have an answer for that.
Yeah. Well, so there's I mean, even with healthcare, well, you've got like you can review which hospital has a good reputation and you go to it. You're not going to make decisions like what anesthetic you use. That's You're going to rely upon medical professionals to make that decision for you, right? But you can still select from different hospitals and which is a good hospital, which is a bad one. That's one thing. When my fiance was having our son in the Philippines, I was thinking, what hospital should we have the baby at? So I was going through the reputation, looking what people said, on different forums, which have the best doctors, the most qualified staff. So I think that is you can still make that decision, even if you're not a medical expert. You can go by what other people are saying, and different hospitals are going to have higher standards of care. Um, you're not just shooting in
Uh,
the dark.
Zach, can I call you just Zach, right? Is that all right for you?
Yeah, yeah, please.
Okay, Zach, look, so you have an emergence problem, right? It's the matter of the life. So you don't have a choice. Let's say you are somewhere, you go to travel, right? And
Uh-huh.
suddenly something wrong happens with you. It's the middle of the nowhere. So what in this case? What do you think? I mean, you cannot be. Sometimes you don't have a choice to go the place you would like to, right?
Well, usually
It's the
people
matter
are
of.
going to have catastrophic care covered by insurance, and insurance does sort of have a choice in negotiating with the hospitals about what prices are charged.
Right. Yeah. I kind of want to just go back to the point Zach previously made about basically looking at reviews for hospitals, reviews for doctors, and reviews for basically looking at the reputation of a hospital. Yes, that may do something, but just looking at the reputation of a hospital, that a hospital still might have 100 different doctors. You might not know what doctor you're getting. There's the point that I'm making is there's so much uncertainty in the healthcare system. For example, you brought up the analogy of food. I know I have to eat roughly the same certain amount every day. There's not going to be one day where I wake up and I have to eat 30,000 calories. That's never going to happen. But in healthcare, you might go 5 years without ever going to the doctor, and then you might have to spend a week in the hospital. It's very uncertain, and it's almost impossible for people to be a medical expert. For example, how do you know that your doctor isn't lying to you? It's based basically on trust because you don't have that knowledge.
Oh, yeah. And Zach, uh, one additional question. Uh, how anarchy capitalism going to work on blood donations?
Well, they would pay people for their blood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, so Zach, I do want to ask you, I do want to actually kind of nail down your policy approach. Are you for no government regulation in the marketplace, or are you more for a Switzerland type role where the government basically subsidizes the poor?
I'm for no government. Period.
Okay, so no government.
No government.
In that case, right, right. In that case, again, how do you make sure that people aren't being so you're for no government. How would you even know right now in the Philippines? You went there. There's probably a licensing requirement. You brought up the example of the Philippines with your fiance. There was probably a licensing requirement that a person has to go to become a doctor. I'm almost sure there is one. In the system you're describing,
There
there
is,
would be
yes.
no requirement. So that leads to even less uncertainty overall. Again, yes.
Yeah, that's correct. I am opposed to compulsory licensure, although I'm fine with voluntary licensure. So people could, get certifications like there's the CompTIA certification for computer technical people. So it's entirely voluntary, right? You take the courses or whatever. And again, I think that hospitals are going to have standards for the doctors they hire, and the best hospitals will have the highest standards. And yeah, that's how you ensure quality by going to the right hospitals, by choosing the ones that you can afford. There's going to be different levels, obviously, and without the compulsory licensure, you're not going to have the issues Like in Canada, we have all these foreign doctors coming to Canada, but they can't practice. They're all driving cabs or doing whatever because they'd have to, go to medical school again for 8 years. So you'd have all these foreign doctors practicing, and nurse practitioners can handle a lot of the smaller stuff, right? Which would end up bringing the cost down significantly.
But
Right.
the problem, yeah, go on,
Yeah.
go on.
Yes. So I agree with you that yes, that might be an onerous government regulation that they require you to go to medical school for another 8 years after you've been certified to be a doctor in a different country.
Right.
But you said the hospitals would have standards.
Yeah.
Only hospitals that would have wealthy patients would be able to enforce those standards that they're actually getting good care.
Well, and in even in regulated capitalism, you have great hospitals and then marginal ones, right? That's a feature of every system.
Yes, but I'm saying that the marginal systems in regulated capitalism are much better than the marginal systems in an anarcho-capitalist society because in regulated capitalism, the marginalized systems are subject to a basic level of regulation. I'm not necessarily for complete socialized medicine, but I think there has to be some mechanism to which the poor are basically have some of their healthcare costs subsidized because to me, that seems like the most rational thing to do at this point in time.
Well, I mean, it's not like we can really tell that would be the case. There is no anarcho-capitalist society that you can look at, right? This is all very theoretical. Uh, but
Right.
But I don't think that would necessarily be the case. I think that you would have a lot of doctors donating their time, people donating money to provide care for the indigent. If you look at, how unregulated markets work, it's not like poor people in the West eat really bad food, you know, even though it's sort of unregulated capitalist market for agriculture and for food, right? Even the housing for
But
poor people in the West is pretty good, especially by global standards. So I don't see why healthcare has to be any different. Even if the very rich get amazing care, I still think the standard of care for the poor in a libertarian society is going to be pretty good.
Right, right. Again, you brought up the analogy of food. I disagree with that. For example, I can walk outside right now and within half a mile I can pick an apple off the tree and eat it. It's not analogous to healthcare. Healthcare is very difficult to understand when you're not a doctor. I don't think that's analogous. And furthermore, like you talked about food and building. In the US economy, I can't speak to other economies. I assume Canada is like this as well because Canada is actually, I would say, marginally to the left of the United States. I would assume that you actually have things like building regulations. You actually have things like food safety regulations. So even what you're comparing them to still has a level of regulation. And that's why one of my basic arguments is if this is a great system, there should be some real world evidence. And there's regulation everywhere. So I don't see how you can argue from an empirical point of view.
Well, I think this is actually an important point. So if you go back and look at the introduction of regulation in the United States, for example, during the so-called progressive era, you see that instead of being foisted on an unwilling industry by reformers and righteous people, regulations were actually first lobbied for by big business because the imposition of high fixed costs on a given industry is an effective way of smashing your smaller competitors. Or to put it another way, if you have a firm of 100 people, it's a lot easier to spare one guy to sit in a room filling out forms all day than if you have a firm of just three. So there's sort of a mythology around regulation and where it came from. That before the markets were regulated, all the food had worms in it and people were dying. When in reality, that's not the case. That it was actually sort of a scam perpetrated by established business interests that didn't want to compete with small business.
Oh, so I have a question for you, Zach.
Yeah,
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
like,
Ask the question, and then I would like to quickly respond after the question. But yes, go
absolutely.
ahead,
Yeah,
ask it.
yeah. So you say that regulation is kind of helps other competitors get crush over other competitors, right?
yeah.
Is
For
that what
big
you said?
business to crush smaller competitors. That's correct. Yes.
So how do you think is going to competition will happen in anarchy capitalism when it comes to the healthcare system?
Well, you'll have hospitals and doctors all competing on price and quality.
Price and quality. Just say, is it is there any rooms that price and quality will become lucrative, and they will go beyond this kind of things, like beyond just competing in the market but using other leverage, like yeah, if there is no regulation, so you can have some mobs who will destroy your business competitors. No, you don't think so?
Well, that's why you have a legal system. Let's go back to hydrogen here. I don't want to miss out. He had something to say.
Right. I would say first, I've got two responses. The first is, all right, then we can make regulations only. Give me a number of employees. Say you've got 50 employees. If you're under 50 employees, you are not subject to that regulation. In the US, we have many regulations like that, where if you make, there's actually Medicare is a great example. If you have under 50 employees, you are not subject to the regulations. If you have over 50 employees, you are. So that is one way of differentiating. Second, I actually agree with Lowell's here. In an anarcho-capitalist society, big business, let's just assume that what you're saying is true. I'm not saying it is, but let's assume it. Big business used a disproportionate amount of power to harm small businesses. If we assume your example is true, there is no reason to believe that they would not find another mechanism other than the government to do that under anarcho-capitalism. So if what you're saying is big business wants to hurt small business, big business wants to hurt small business, my question to you would be, how do you know that that won't happen when there's no regulation at all?
Well, if you're talking about like sending mobs after them, like Lois was saying,
Not necessarily sending mobs,
then what mechanism are you
using
talking
pretty much,
about?
how about price cutting to put companies out of business? Even something like a mob, even something less discreet like a mob, like maybe buying a plot of land next to a nearby hospital and making it a toxic waste dump. Just, I don't know, that's kind of a ridiculous example, and I'm not sure that would ever happen, but it's used to illustrate.
Well, if you're polluting, then that's a form of aggression, and the court system, the police would deal with that. In terms of undercutting the price, this is the it's a boogeyman, basically the idea that you could just undercut your opponents on price, force them out of business, and then jack up the prices. It's never worked historically. There's never been a successful case of doing that, and it's a good
Oh,
thing if a
oh, oh,
company wants to cut their prices and
I,
oh, Zach,
charge
Zach,
less.
Zach,
I,
hold on, Zach, hold on.
Yeah,
I,
Sorry for interrupting, but we have a case of Amazon.
but
yeah,
Amazon still has low prices to this day. They've never jacked up the price. Sure, they can lower the price and corner the market, but if the price is still low, then what's the problem?
I'll give you another example. Carnegie Steel in the late 1800s here in America.
What happened with them?
Basically, there was one company that made almost all the steel in America.
Uh-huh.
Some employees from Carnegie Steel would go and they would create their own steel company. Well, in those locations where those employees came and said, "Hey, we're going to price it 1 or 2 cents lower," Carnegie Steel cut their prices even more, basically putting those companies out of business, and then they would raise their prices. The company actually later got absorbed into U.S. Steel, which was bought by, I believe, J.P. Morgan.
Well, I'm not familiar with the facts of that case. I definitely have to look into it. Um, yeah, I don't know anything about U.S. Steel or definitely have to examine all the details on that, whether it's
Right,
true or
right.
not. Right?
But my point is, even if I can't, I'm not the CEO of a large corporation. A CEO of a large corporation, or who's ever responsible for it, is going to probably come up with some sort of way to use their disproportionate power to harm small businesses. You've already kind of established that big business naturally does want to harm small business. You implied that when you said that regulation was foisted upon small businesses by big businesses. So if they're going to use their disproportionate power, how is not having a government? And also, you mentioned police and court systems. I I know this is like a completely separate question, but just yeah, just explain that how there would be police and court systems and how those court systems would derive their authority under a society with no government.
Well, basically, you'd have a codified system of law. I mean, for a complete discussion of a libertarian legal order, I recommend that anybody read Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard. It's obviously a complicated subject that requires a complete book to get really into the details. But basically, you'd still have police, you'd still have laws, you'd still have courts. They'd be private, they wouldn't be public. And also, individuals could act in a police capacity. There's nothing, no special rights for police, no qualified immunity. If the police think that there's a criminal and they catch them, but they end up committing crimes against them, they're just as liable as anybody else if the person turns out to be innocent. I mean, it's a very complicated subject, but basically there would still be police, courts, but it'd be private, not socialized.
Right. You did.
Hydrogen. Yeah, hold
Yeah.
on. I have a question for
Mhm.
you. So you're
Which
talking about
you,
the
hydrogen you or Zach you?
I,
uh,
I
uh,
I'm hydrogen. You can just call me Chris if you want. You can just
Chris.
call me Chris.
Chris. Chris, look. So you're advocating for the more government control system, yeah? But we know the problem of the government. The problem of the government sometimes some of the things which is regulated by government could become political leverage, so how you gonna fight against that because you don't have an anti-monopolies uh, anti so your anti-monopolies policy won't work when it comes to the government regulation, right? So how are you gonna um, I don't know, distract some politicians to use this as a political leverage.
Well, yes, you raise a good point. First off, I'm not necessarily advocating for more government. I'm just not advocating for anarcho-capitalism. Now, about corruption in the government, yes, governments are going to have corruption. Yes, that is somewhat inevitable. The question is not whether governments will have corruption. The question is whether the corruption of the governments would basically harm a society more than the absence of a government would. That that's basically what I'm arguing. And yes, I do agree with you. Politicians can be corrupt, but that's why there should be transparency in the legal system, and that's why we should have democracy at some level in the government. So where politics, at least the people, are deciding some of it.
But the problem is, politicians usually they will do whatever they act like a business, right? But they have a legal rights to do so. And how you gonna do that? So we're not talking about US, right? So we're talking about two systems, and the two system could be applied in countries. We have some sort of some kind of systems in different countries. So if you look those countries where more government presences exist, uh, people rights sometimes, most of the time, their rights is infringed, and democracy are not exist. So how you gonna how you gonna protect people from this
Yeah,
situation.
no, yeah, no, that I do agree. That is a good question, and I would answer it with something that we have here in the United States, a Bill of Rights, basically saying you have the freedom of speech, you have the freedom of religion, you have all these freedoms, and the government cannot infringe upon that. And even if politicians want to pass a law against it, they can't unless they want to amend the Constitution. So I'd make it almost, I would put it in Constitution that there's a Bill of Rights. So something put similar to the United States Bill of Rights.
All right, I've got a
Mhm.
question for you, Chris. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, do you so how can you reconcile if you agree? Okay, it's sorry. Let me let me start over. It's wrong to threaten an innocent person with violence, right? I think we can all agree with that. That if a mugger goes into a 7-Eleven, he pulls out his gun and says, "Give me your money, or I'm going to shoot you," then that is wrong. That is a bad thing. It's coercion. It's immoral. Okay, so that's my first point. My second is that if our moral theories are to have any relevance whatsoever, they have to be universally applicable. For one to act is to give permission for all to act. We don't have different standards for A and different standards for B. If you have a proper moral theory, it applies to all people and all organizations. Okay, so if we accept point A and we accept point B, then I don't see how we can stand to have government because all government revenue is collected through coercion, right? The income tax, they say, give us your money, give us a third of your income, or we'll lock you in jail. That's a threat of violence in order to get your money. And just like the mugger, just like the robber at the 7-Eleven is committing an immoral act, so is the state when they collect taxes. What's your view on that? How do you reconcile that?
Right. Well, it is an interesting argument. First, I would say I think there's a level of inevitability to that. Um, look through just about any society in history: ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, Babylon, uh, England, Europe for thousands of years, China. There's some tribute to an organization. There's almost always some tribute to an organization. So first, I think there's a level of inevitability. The second thing you brought up was that A always basically has the same moral rights and moral responsibilities, if you would label it as such. They live by the same moral code as B. So if A is a person and a person cannot coerce someone into giving them money, and B is the government, and B cannot, then B should not be able to coerce them into giving someone money. I'd say comparing the morality of a individual person and the morality of an organization that is the government for 300 million of people, I'm not sure that's analogous. The second I would say is there's really no other way government can exist. So if you agree that taxation is basically so immoral that it should not exist under any circumstances, then your only option is to have no government. And in that case, what prevents someone from saying, someone down the store saying, all right, this neighborhood is now my government. You got five guys with guns. You can either move out, leave your house, and I get your house, or you can join my government.
Well, you'd have a
Oh,
police force
Zach.
that would stop that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, Zach. About the police, right? So you are for anarcho-capitalism, right? Everything is related to money, right? So
Right.
money is capital is the more important things which is exist, right? So capital doesn't work for the people, but people work for the capital. The problem is, you know, when we live in one society, one country, we have a government, and they decide who is a policeman, who is a other departments. But how you gonna enforce society to accept your policemen? Like I mean, how is gonna work? How do you gonna pay for them?
Yeah, so I imagine, obviously I can't tell the future. I don't know exactly how an anarcho-capitalist society would work. What I imagine is you'd have like a subscription service, so you pay $50, $100 a month to Acme Police Company, and in return, they have coverage, and if you're the victim of a crime, then they're gonna sort of pursue that for you. And the advantage to the system is you'd have multiple competing police companies. Okay, so if one police company is doing a bad job, maybe they're harassing pot smokers instead of going out after violent criminals, then at the very least you can cancel your subscription and you can go with another company, right? But when you have state monopoly policing, you have no option. You just got to pay your taxes. You get whatever police you get, and that's all. So at least there's that mechanism to ensure that the police are more responsive to their customers.
But
Right, right.
uh, yeah, yeah, go on. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Again, I asked a question a while back. It was basically, how does the police derive its authority? Say I don't subscribe to Police A, and Police A comes to my house and says, "Hey, you've done something." I say, "I don't subscribe to Police A. You have no authority over me."
Well, basically, what
What happens?
happens is when a criminal commits a crime, that creates a right of redress on the part of the victim. So if a criminal, beats me up, let's say, severe assault, then then I have the right to bring that criminal to justice, to take them to court, and to get restitution or have them thrown in jail or whatever the codified statute says happens when you are the victim of an aggravated assault. So if you were the criminal that beat me up, then they would have the right to go and arrest you. Um, yeah.
Okay, so look,
Right.
um, yeah, Zach, one question for you. What is the difference between police and anarcho-capitalism and mafia? Like mafia, like mobs and other things. I think they do the same thing.
Well, the
But the
difference
problem
is
is
that
one
the
is
police and the anarcho-capitalist society are voluntary, and the mafia is actually more like the state in that they demand your protection money whether you want it or not, right? Whereas the
Uh,
police in an anarcho-capitalist society, you choose to buy their service.
right, right. Yes, I think you bring up something good. But here's what I want to ask you: was the mafia created by the government?
I don't think so. It was created by the
So
mafia.
how do you know? So if it wasn't created by the government, then how do you know? Why do you assume that that wouldn't pop up in an anarcho-capitalist society?
I don't. You would have criminals in an anarcho-capitalist society. It's not utopian. It's still problems. There's still criminals. Sure. That's why you have police.
Right. But then wouldn't they be able to amass more power when there's not a government competing with them for police?
The mafia?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, why? They they have a lot of money. Say I have $5 million. Say I beat you up and then I go back to my house. I
Uh,
have five armed security. Your police come here and say, you have to go to court. I say, all right, let's go to my court. I just created my own court and my bodyguard here is the judge and I'm the jury. Let's come to my court.
but if you have a
It's no worse
kangaroo
than your
court,
court.
if you have a kangaroo court, nobody's going to care if you take somebody to it or not. It's obviously a kangaroo court, and its verdict will have no meaning, right? But at the same time, okay, you want to go around beating people up, and then expecting your
No,
bodyguards
not
to
anyone.
protect
Not
you.
anyone. Just one person.
Okay, just one person. But at the same time, how much are you going to pay your bodyguard? Because he's going to have to basically die because the police force is coming to arrest you. He's going to try to stop them. He's going to die. So how much are you going to pay this bodyguard that he's going to give up his life to defend you because you want to go around beating one person up? It's not feasible. It's not an economically feasible model to pay somebody, you would have to pay him all your money. You still wouldn't take it because he's going to die.
Uh,
Uh,
well, let's see. In my scenario, I had $5 million, so I'll pay him. I'll pay him $150,000 a year. That's a
But
very nice salary,
what good is
and
one hundred and fifty
I don't
thousand
think he
dollars
would
if you're
die.
dead?
But how does he know I'm going to attack someone? He doesn't, so he's going to take the job.
Well, he would. What about when the police show up? He's going to go and die, or would he just say,
No, no,
"I
you don't
surrender.
see.
You guys
I
can take
signed
him"?
a co- I signed a contract with him that he would have to serve me for 1 year.
What does he care? He'll breach the contract. What are you going to do? Sue him?
the
What?
okay,
So,
Zach. Okay,
so
wait, hold on. Hold on. The problem is, in my opinion, so we are talking about in our views, right? And if we talk about the anarcho-capitalism, if it happens, then the people would be different. So what is morally right now won't be morally right tomorrow. So my question is, Zach, how do you gonna teach people those morals? Because we obviously have a something called morally, and sometimes morality is not interconnect with the money capital.
Well, I don't think that people would necessarily be different. I don't think human nature is going to change just because we have an anarcho-capitalist society.
uh, yeah, yeah, I would like to follow that up. Do you believe that different societies throughout history have had different morals?
Who are you asking? Me or Wills?
Do- I Zach, I'm asking you, do you
Okay,
think different societies throughout history have had different morals?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I haven't given it a lot of thought, but um,
So, if
yeah.
morality is somewhat relative, or at least appears to be, how can you be so sure?
Well, I mean, there's
I mean,
morality, and
by
then
your own,
there's people's moral codes, right? It's not necessarily the same thing. Like, I think it's wrong to kill, to steal, to rape. I think all these things are objectively wrong. Different societies might have had different views on that, but I don't think they're right. You know.
right? I think different societies have had both different morals and different moral codes. And furthermore, by your own admission, you said anarcho-capitalism has never existed. Well, that's a pretty big assumption to make.
Actually,
People
what I said
will
was
retain.
anarcho-capitalism doesn't exist presently.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. You're right. You're right. If anarcho-capitalism does not exist presently, how can you be so sure?
Yeah, maybe I can't. I don't know. It's not something I have a strong opinion on.
Okay,
All
so
right.
my
Fair enough.
my my I can explain you one thing, guys. So it's not opinion, but the problem is, I'm from the country which was a part of Soviet Union, right? My father and mothers, they are morally more Soviet people, more socialistic people, right?
Uh-huh.
The problem is when Soviet Union has crushed, yeah, the
Yeah.
government gives a lot of, because when socialism was in Soviet Union, every worker was the owner of the factory. I mean, every person has a right to, the poor. I mean, there wasn't one person who owned the factory. A lot of workers, they owned the factory. When the system has collapsed, people got their kind of stocks, and and the problem is government regulated. I am anti-government as well, but government use a lot of leverages to make people fool because people was morally different. The money was not so much important, and also uh, their view on the world was different. When capitalism came out to the former Soviet countries, everything got really crazy. Criminals got crazy. Police, they corrupted so hard. and everything like that. So, I mean, we always should to count on the morality when we change one system to another, because if you change uh, our system to anarcho-capitalism, I'm pretty much sure next generation will have a lot of troubles because we wasn't taking morally education problems so much importantly. So yeah, you can go on. It's my just opinion. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, you're good.
No, I think you raise an important point. When the Soviet Union fell, there was that sort of like gangster capitalism, I guess you could call it, or I don't think that I think that to have a libertarian society, there are certain preconditions. You need to have a widespread respect for property rights. You have to have a functioning legal order. So during like the late 19th century in America, government spending was about 3% of GDP. So it wasn't an anarcho-capitalist society, but it was a very libertarian, laissez-faire society. There was free market capitalism, minimal government intervention in the marketplace. And at the start of this debate, Chris, he said, all the richest countries in the world are regulated democracies.
Yes.
And well, the reason why the United States is the richest country in the world is its libertarian roots, because they had that laissez-faire capitalism, and that led to the capital accumulation. It's not because of the welfare state or the regulations, but what preceded that. It's why Europe is such a rich area, is because that's where capitalism originated. That's where um, because of the relative political anarchy, people could vote with their feet. So it wasn't like a big centralized government. It was a whole bunch of patchwork of duchies and different smaller states, basically. So that's why capitalism originated in Europe. And the reason why these nations are so rich is because of their market economy, not because of their regulations.
Right. I will respond to what you said. I will. But first, I didn't get a chance to respond to basically our story of the police. You said that my bodyguard would basically just quit, right? Because he doesn't want to die.
Right.
Well, why wouldn't the police officer coming to arrest me do the same thing? My bodyguard could kill him just as easily. Why would he take that job?
Well, he's on the side of good, and he's got the whole police force with him.
I mean, it doesn't matter if he's got the whole police force with him if he's going to die, does it?
But he's not going to die. You just got the one bodyguard. He's
Uh,
got all his police buddies, right?
my
They surround you. They're blaring the sirens. They're probably
so
calling in other police. They probably got arrangements with other police that if there is like an armed standoff, they're coming in too. Different police companies, right?
I mean, that would make a subscription to a police pretty expensive, no?
Why do soldiers risk their lives in war, right? Because they think they're on the side of good. You know,
Right. But war costs a lot of money. So my point is, in that case, police would be very expensive, no?
war costs a lot of money, which is why you don't have these in an capitalist society. You don't have these evil people going around conquering because war costs a lot of money. Waging a war of aggression is prohibitively expensive, requires both the ability to coercively collect taxes and the ability to debase the money supply. So it's not a feasible business model for somebody to say, all right, I'm going to hire five guys. We're going to go take over this farm because it costs too much. It would be much cheaper to just buy the farm.
Right. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but that doesn't really answer the question I asked. I was saying if you have to send 20, 30 police guys over to arrest me and I just beat someone up, that would make for a pretty expensive police force, no?
No, because it's very rare, right? People don't resist the police. They don't want to get killed. So it only happens once in a blue moon that somebody's crazy enough to get in the standoff, right? Like in your
uh,
data.
I mean, you,
okay.
you're
I
just,
think I need to ask one question to you, Hydrogen. All right.
mhm.
The problem is this problems happens usually, in my opinion, it happens in more governmental society. Those things, because we think we can envisage those problems because we have landmarks of these situations. A lot of that kind of things happens in different countries. Like in my country, you know. There is a capitalism, and sometimes, because people, most less majority of people, they are poor. There are, a lot of rich people who usually use police as a push power.
Right. No, no, I actually kind of agree with that. Although I would say, police power is the largest and the state is more totalitarian. I actually agree. I live in America. I agree with police reform. I'm not for uh, qualified immunity, at least to the level where it normally is. So I agree with you,
Do you want to defund the
at least to
police?
some extent. Uh, I haven't really thought about that. Not necessarily, no.
So, Zach, uh,
I mean,
so
wait.
when it co-
Yeah,
yeah,
I was going to respond to what Zach said about how basically libertarian roots. I did say I would respond. How libertarian roots made America the richest country in the world.
Uh-huh.
Uh, government spending 3% of GDP. That's a lot more than zero. First of all, and second, there was massive growth in the U.S. economy. Uh, in the 1950s, in the 1960s, in the 1970s, even up till today. And actually, in the late 1800s, I believe it was sometime around the late 1880s or the 1890s. Yes, that is when China became this. America overtook China to become the largest economic power in the country in the world. But yeah, America's had massive economic growth since then, and also you don't have to stop at 1900. You can keep going. We had two world wars, and after the First World War, we had a Great Depression.
Right, a Great Depression caused by government uh, banking policy, central banking policy.
I mean, I'm not necessarily trying to argue about that. My point is that we have had massive economic growth at every other time in U.S. history, not just the time when government only spent 3%.
But the growth comes from the market economy. The government the
Yeah, I,
government
I
is just
agree. I'm a capitalist. I agree with capitalism, but
uh,
capitalism has delivered remarkable growth pretty much every other time when we didn't have 3% economic growth,
well. First, I don't
3%
I don't think that
government spending.
first I don't agree with GDP statistics because they count government spending as if it's productive. Like if you hired a bureaucrat to sit in a room and do nothing, that would increase GDP. Or if the government bought $1 trillion worth of cars and drove them into the ocean, that would increase GDP, but it would make the nation a poorer place. So I don't necessarily accept the GDP statistic in the first place.
yeah, in my opinion, it's a really good point. But both of you, I just want to Zach answer this question firstly by him, and then hydrogen. This question both for you, uh, both of you, right? So just say we have a competition system, right? In both system, more government controlled system, there are less or more competition, right? Rather than anarcho capitalism, I would say less than anarcho capitalism. But do you think just there is a problem called overproduction, which is facing China right now? Do you think when there is an overproduction problems is pops up in the system, do you think competitors will do everything to get the price up? Like we have some cartels called OPEC, like they controlling the oil prices, right? And do you think this something could happen in anarchy capitalism, or just say in more government controlled system? Do you understand the question? Sorry.
I do understand the question, and I disagree that you can have a general glut of overproduction. There's a thing called Say's law, which basically states that supply of X constitutes demand for Y, and basically you can't have overproduction because like a general glut of overproduction, because if you produce tires, that means you can buy houses and so on and so forth. So yeah, I don't believe in a general glut of overproduction, and also cartels can't can't function absent government intervention, because the pressure to break from the cartel is always secretly break from the cartel is always too strong, right? So they everybody agrees to sell their widget for $80, and then this one company on the sly starts selling their widgets for 70, undercutting them, getting all the business. They're not telling anybody. It's all very hush hush. So cartels just don't work on the free market.
So come again. Why does it work? It doesn't work in anarchy capitalism. I didn't get that. Sorry.
Because the pressure to secretly break from the cartel is always too strong. It always wins out.
Okay, so we don't have. There is no possibilities that monopolies or cartels will ever happen in anarchy capitalism, right?
Well, what do you mean by monopoly? If you mean dominant market share, then sure, a company can become a monopoly simply through outcompeting their competition, like Microsoft or Walmart. But a harmful monopoly cannot result, and never has resulted in the market economy, free market, because the threat of competition developing alone is enough to keep the monopolistic firm from charging the so-called monopoly price. So the only historical monopolies that have been able to charge the monopoly price have been those with a grant of monopoly privilege from the state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Uh,
So how about you, the hydrogen?
yeah, to your original question, I actually have to somewhat agree with Zach. I think the market should decide supply and demand, and in that case, I think a glut of overproduction would be very rare.
But
Uh,
do you hear me?
you may,
Sorry, I mean, yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry. I
Overproduction.
think you just cut out for a second.
Okay, okay. Sorry. Go on. Uh,
No, no,
so my question is, so we live there. So it's in evidence, like we can take those problems as a like we have evidence like China is a really hardly governmental controlled society, and the US in some cases too, but we still have an overproduction problem. And how is it gonna solve the problem in more governmental controlled capitalism?
I don't necessarily think that uh, the government's one of the government's roles should be to solve that. I generally think the market is pretty good at deciding that.
Yeah, I mean, if you produce a lot of stuff, then supply has increased and demand has stayed the same, so the price goes down, right? So people have cheaper stuff. I don't know. It seems good.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that.
Yeah, but the problem is you have more governmental controlled countries. They
Oh,
have
oh,
a
I,
yeah
yeah, I think I get it now. Government is going to interfere with supply and demand. Right.
yeah. So
Yeah, right. I don't necessarily agree. I think that may have happened. That certainly probably happened in China, but I'm not arg I'm not advocating for a government like China. I don't want a government that plays too heavy of a role. I think here in the U.S., uh, we have a very good economy. I think in most Western countries, we have a very good economy, and you can't necessarily find so many examples of overproduction. Like I'm trying to think now, and to be honest, I can't think of any example here in the U.S. Of overproduction. You might be aware of one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I
So,
agree with you.
yeah.
And my question for Zach is, what would be a currency in, um, anarcho capitalism?
Bitcoin, obviously.
Ah, that's cool.
No,
Uh,
you would have competing currencies. So maybe a gold standard would win out, or maybe Bitcoin. I am a believer in hard money. In I'm very opposed to inflation. Basically, historically, um, everybody who's ridden on money has been what I'm going to call a monetary crank. They believe that printing money creates wealth. Virtually everybody has said this in the history of thought, except for the people who go all the way to the hard money position, which says any amount of money is enough. You don't need to create any more money, and printing money is bad because you get inflation. So so I do believe in like a gold standard or Bitcoin because there is a fixed supply of Bitcoin. Or I mean, you could even have just like a paper money so long as you didn't create any more of it, and you had a fixed supply. That would be good.
okay,
I,
so same question for you, hydrogen, but another ways. How do you think can governmental, we have some kind of, we have a neoliberalism time right now, right? Some one country's got
well,
a
generally.
lot of, yeah, a lot of profits, like US and West countries, they got a lot of profit from the poor countries. That's statistically not wrong. You can easily prove that. But what do you think? You know, a whole government, if they have such a power to printing money, could prevent people uh, to become a poor.
Uh, yes, I think that I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. It could eliminate poverty altogether, but yes, governments printing money does give it some power. For example, how do US dollars get their value? Well, they're backed by the US government, but another reason is that you can only pay your taxes to the US government in US dollars, and you have to pay your taxes, so you have to use US dollars.
That's the MMT theory.
Uh, just elaborate, I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's modern monetary theory. That's one of the things that they say is that money gets its value from taxes, basically. So just the same thing you said.
I maybe not necessarily all. I'm not saying all its value. I'm saying a portion of its value.
Yeah,
But
money
yes,
originates in the market economy, and how it works is you have barter, right? People are just trading stuff, but they have the double coincidence of wants, which is, you're selling shoes and you want milk. Now you have to find some guy that has milk and wants shoes, which is obviously very difficult compared to just finding somebody who wants shoes and then finding somebody who has milk, right? It's a much simpler transaction. So what
yeah,
happens is the most commonly desired commodity in the economy becomes money. This is why historically some African tribes would use cattle as money, and all sorts of things have been used as money. Usually gold and silver would win out because they have a number of money-ish qualities. So that's where money originates in the market economy as a means of escaping the double coincidence of wants. And then it was later, basically in the 17th century, China had some paper money experiments, but basically it was with the New World that paper money got introduced. The government would sort of took over the money supply and started using paper money.
Okay,
Uh,
so sorry. Let's dive into the another question about the schools. I think that's that's really interesting subject because it's interesting that something we sometimes neglect when we are young, or as a parents don't teach our child will someday shoot us or give us a lot of profits. So in you guys in your system, how schools gonna help society when we obviously choose the system which is more better for society. So I just want to listen this question. Answer, sorry. Go on.
yeah, I think education is very important, and I think government has some role in education. Uh, However, we're seeing more and more now. You have things like Khan Academy or just YouTube videos. You can learn stuff online. I think that's good as well. I think private schools definitely have a role, but I think that for people who don't have enough money to go to private schools, I think that the government should provide a school system. I'm in favor of public education.
I think the purpose of the public education system isn't to educate people. It's to promote conformity and obedience and to condition you to be a good worker soldier bee. I think that
I,
the public school system is terrible. It's extremely expensive. It produces horrible results, and there's so much bureaucracy and waste, and I would much rather have just a market economy. People homeschooling is great because the ideal form of instruction is one-on-one tutoring, and you can get that with homeschooling, right? You can't, uh, so homeschooling, public school or private schools. I would dismantle the whole public school system.
Zach, just to follow up on that, you said one-on-one tutoring is the most ideal form.
Hmm.
Why do you think that private schools and other schools you probably think would be better? Why do you think they don't do that?
Well, it's not cost effective, right? You've got
Yes, it's
you
very expensive.
very expensive, right? But you can
And
do it
let
with
me
homeschooling. That's the great thing about homeschooling.
right. And my pushback on that would be, is a parent really, I mean, you have to teach your kids a lot of different things, math, science, and it takes a lot of time. I'm not sure all parents want to basically have their default be, well, you have to teach your kid everything. I mean,
Yeah, that's why you have
I'll
private
be
schools
honest.
for the people that don't want to do it, right? I'm just saying that's the
Right,
best
right.
solution.
But I'm saying private schools, they might not have money to send their kids to private schools.
Well, they've got money to pay the taxes to send their kids to public schools, right? That doesn't
Not
come out
not
of
ne-
the thin
not
air.
necessarily. No, not necessarily. In the US, poor people pay almost no money to public schools.
Yeah, and you can have charity for the poor, to finance their education, scholarships, that sort of thing.
Zach, may I
So
ask you one question? Yeah, okay. Zach, so do you think that literacy is going to be more widespread than more controlled government in anarchy capitalism?
I think literacy rates are pretty much 100% and are going to be, regardless of which way we go, in at least in Western societies.
No, 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 no. It doesn't work in the way. But look, we had the feudalism, right?
Yeah.
Back in the feudalism, the literacy rate was really low, like 5, sometimes 7%. For instance, in Russian Empire, that was something like 12% literacy. And do you
But that was a
think
long time ago,
when
right? We've made advances
yeah,
since then.
Yeah, but we have still Africa.
Yeah, I guess my point is like once you reach like 99, 100% literacy, you don't go back. If you were never there, sure, it's a problem. But has there ever been an example of a country that's had, that reached like 100% literacy and then went back to 70 or 50%? I don't think it can happen because it's just I don't see how it could possibly happen, regardless of the
Yeah,
system of government, even if we went communism or something. I don't see how
yeah,
it could happen.
yeah, Zach. Yeah, Zach. Look, the problem is, yeah, I don't advocate for any system, but empirical, even statistic, right?
Uh-huh.
Look, the problem is, um, just in Soviet Union, right? Just as an example, and I know this example. In Soviet Union, if you want to get to university, uh, every everybody had the right to go to university. But when it collapsed in Uzbekistan, there is not too much universities, but there is a limit to people to get the higher education. Only 2%, only 2% of all graduates from high school are able to get to college. And if you want to get college, yeah, if you are not 50 smartest appliance, you need to pay extra money, a lot of money, like 3,000 or $5,000 a year. It's a lot of money for Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
And you know, if you look at statistics now and back in the Soviet Union, literacy rate dropping, dramatically dropping. So it used to be 99%, but nowadays it's almost like 85, 86%. How do you think? Is that valuable proof that if you don't support public schooling or universities and other things, the literacy rate will drop dramatically.
They don't have public schools in Russia?
They have not in Russia. Oh, sorry, I was speaking. But most of the school, uh, they have kind of a lot of young people. Okay, they work like from 12 years old, from 13 years old, they starting to work illegally because they need to make money because their parents don't have money. It's free, but people don't go to school because they need to earn money to eat something, feed themselves.
I guess
That's
my,
the
my point
problem.
is that, you know, that's happening in a system with public schools. So I don't see how that's the fault of a theoretical anarcho-capitalist society that has private schools. But I mean, conditions in the third world are a lot different from modern industrialized Western nations, right? That's how things
They
are over there. It's
Yeah, I mean, the problem is you can easily go to this flop. You can easily go this trap. Doesn't matter industrialized or not, because people tend to become poor fastly rather than become fastly rich. And what do you think? My main question was that if anarcho-capitalism comes out, we live in this system, is that going to more educate people, or we will have a lot of less educated people?
that's a good question. Actually, it could very well be less. I mean, you look at like Canada or other Western nations, everybody goes to university or college. It doesn't matter how dumb you are, A lot of people go there, they party for 4 years, they don't really learn anything. So it could well be without, the government subsidies and a lot of people start working at a younger age and not everybody goes to college. I don't think everybody needs necessarily a post-secondary education or is in a position to benefit from it.
Uh, yeah, I actually partially agree with that, but I do, Zach, I think I'm not sure if in America only the graduating class is going to graduate high school this year or last year, basically for the last 5 years. Only about 35 to 40% of those students are actually going to graduate with a 4 year degree. So it's certainly not everyone or even most people. But
But how many are going to
and I,
attend?
I think it's about 55 to 60%.
Okay. Yeah, I think in Canada
I mean,
it's
that's
higher than
still,
that. I don't know the statistic by any means, but maybe
yeah.
not actually.
In Canada, I do expect it's higher in Canada. But yeah, I kind of want to ask you another question. I know you said that you implied that anarcho-capitalist society has existed. I think I said I mischaracterized your statement. I said it never existed, and you cut me off and said, no, not in present. So I do want to keep an example of an anarcho-capitalist society that has historically existed.
Yeah, so um, people have said that there's two examples of anarcho-capitalist societies that did exist, and the first is the so-called Wild West in America, and the second is medieval Iceland.
I'm not necessarily sure that the Wild West in America was anarcho-capitalist. I think that we still certainly had a government. We still certainly had state governments. I think the government had less direct control, but as well, especially in the middle of the country. But I'm not necessarily sure that's anarcho-capitalist. I haven't heard of medieval Iceland though. Can you like elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm not really an expert on either of them. Uh, just there are some articles that I could link you to after maybe. So yeah, basically it was sort of stateless. They didn't really have like a government. They had yeah. Honestly, I wish I could say more about it, but I'm not really qualified. I don't I don't I don't really know enough about it. But those are two examples that other people have made of societies that might have been anarcho-capitalist. I think there's a good chance you're right that they weren't necessarily. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But those are examples that other people have pointed out who have studied the issue a bit more than me.
Uh, yeah, I do just want to say, I did say it was 55 to 60% that went to college. I was actually wrong. I was estimating at the time. It says 41%, so it's actually even a little bit lower. We'll even attend college, so go at all. But
Yeah,
my question,
I looked it up too, and apparently in 2016, 54% of Canadians aged 25 to 64 had either college or university qualifications. I don't know if that means a full 4 year course or not, but
I think that's probably two or 4 year. But my question to you, Zach, is would you want to start anarcho-capitalism on a small scale to see if it's actually going to work first?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm a secessionist. I'm in favor of secession at the provincial, municipal, and individual level. Uh, I don't particularly consider myself governed by any state, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. Get a city going, get a small town going.
Uh,
Zach, I have a question both for you, and I'm going to one by one. Zach, what is the country, the best country where anarchy capitalism could be implemented you can implement that right away, anarchy capitalism, the naming country, and it will work very well.
That's a good question. Well, first, I'm not even sure it would work in any country today, in that I think there are certain preconditions for an anarcho-capitalist country to survive. Just like Marx thought that socialism would only work in like industrial Europe, I think that you need to have widespread respect for property rights and very strong functioning legal order. But maybe like Singapore. would be perhaps the best area, or Switzerland. I don't know.
Ye- Yeah, yeah, I do want to ask you, Zach. I think you touched on something interesting there. Uh, you mentioned widespread respect for property rights. I do want to ask you, in the government with no society, how is property rights defended?
You mean a society with no government?
Yes, yes, you're right, you're right, you're right.
Well, by the individual, by the police, and by the legal system, and I guess by your neighbors too, to a degree.
And hydrogen.
Hmm?
One another question for you. Uh, so, which country do you think is the example of the system that every country in the world should be live in?
Uh, I think I could give a lot. I think America is pretty good. I think Canada is pretty good. If you prefer more to the left of America, you could go with a country in Scandinavia or possibly even Eastern Europe, although I would say Scandinavia would be a little bit better. Western Europe, South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, really the system that I'm advocating. There are lots of examples. Really go look up the top GDP per capita or the top income, uh, find one, and it'll probably conform to my model.
Okay, so how about Qatar or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia or Israel? Do you think those countries are a good one?
Uh, let's see, Israel and Saudi Arabia. I'm not so sure about Israel. They're in kind of a conflict right now. Saudi Arabia, I don't think has that high of a GDP per capita. Kuwait
So
and Qatar. I
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, go on, go on.
It, Qatar and Kuwait, I think you are right. I think those would have some of the highest. Those are probably the only exceptions to strong industrial democracies that are at the top, that got almost all their money from oil. Uh, no, I don't want to, say that those countries are not good or that they're bad, but I mean, really,
Yeah,
it's
but
just up to someone. Personally, I wouldn't
yeah,
lift those countries up as examples of my model.
okay. So do you think if those countries are become so rich because of oil, uh, do you really think that the policy that those kind of things makes America only strong, not just a we have a lot of examples of atrocities made by U.S. and U.S. got a lot of power because of those historic moments. So, in my so just one question. Um, do you know that U.S. gets a lot of profit the world using U.S. dollar, right? Fiat currency.
Yeah.
So do you it just we envisage that the US dollars has I don't know collapsed, it lost its price. Nobody used that. Do you really think but this quality of the government system, with this quality of controlling society, with this quality of you know uh, investing in the schooling, investing in other healthcare and other things, public, right? Are U.S. going to be same level as now?
Uh,
Yeah.
I might not have understood your question. Are you asking if the US didn't invest in that, would they still be at the same level?
No, no, no. I mean, you said that we have good examples like U.S., Europe, and so on, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and just say we have one things that U.S. got a lot of power of, like get a lot of benefits of the world using U.S. currency. But for instance, U.S. currency are not using the world stopped using U.S. currency, and the same level of investment in public education, investment in the level of control of government in the U.S. with the same level and without U.S. dollar, use it by world. Do you think that the government and the GDP or other level of measuring life standard of life going to be as good as used to be?
Uh, Maybe it would be slightly lower, but I think it would be roughly the same. I mean, you can look at other countries, even just outside of the West. You could look at countries like Japan and South Korea, I think would be good examples of my model. They don't have the most powerful currency in the world, and they're still fairly wealthy.
I think the issue is that the United States has been able to export inflation because the dollar is the reserve currency of the world and everybody trades oil in it. So if that ceases to be the case, maybe the United States will experience hyperinflation. All these dollars are coming back home that they've been printing for such a long time. We're seeing inflation rates now at 10%. And I think that there is going to be a reckoning for the very loose monetary policy of the last however long. It's been going on for a while.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't really know too much about that. I'm not an expert at that, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I,
do know
I,
we
I
in the
really,
US.
yeah, I really like some points of the ZAG because Zach is about pro free trade, right? But
Absolutely.
the problem is we are not living in the free trade world. We have a powerful countries who has a power. What what used to be mm, got to in a different ways like the government participated in some wars, some bad things, but they become rich and they're using this power as it now, and we have a uh, like strange situation. We nor don't have a good free trade system, nor having good a more socially oriented world. So that's why I asked this question. Thank you for answering. So you can guys go on talk about it.
Yeah, I think free trade is very important. It creates wealth around the world. Different nations specialize in different things, and the law of comparative advantage says that even if country A is better at producing both good A and good B, then they can still profitably trade with the other country just by specializing in whatever they're best at. So, yeah, I think free trade is great. Although I don't agree with managed trade agreements. I think that free trade is what happens naturally. You don't need these managed trade agreements, and you don't need these government junkets where the politicians go off and negotiate and it costs the taxpayer a ton of money.
Yeah, that's what I agree with.
Yeah, yeah, I somewhat agree. I would say I agree with that. I think that's not necessarily an argument for anarcho-capitalism. I think that's an argument for capitalism and a lack of government trade agreements.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
I
I think, but what the problem is, agreement sometimes it's strange things, like government could agree a lot of things, but sometimes it harms the very foundation of free trade, because the government is about to make their country powerful, not about they controlling only one system like a trading, but they control whole system, whole country, and in every transaction. And free trade is oppressed by government, and as well as oppressing the government oppressing two sides. They don't provide good quality of socially I mean social investment. They don't provide social investment good, and they don't provide free trade, fair trade. Yeah, that's my opinion. Thank you.
I guess I would say that any trade is a fair trade.
Yeah, yeah, that seems somewhat reasonable. Yes, I do want to go back. Zach, I know you touched on how private property is protected in our anarcho-capitalism society. One function of the government is saying we recognize your property rights. How does that get replaced in an anarcho-capitalist for society? For example, how do you know who owns what?
Well, first of all, the government is the number one aggressor against your property rights. They're stealing your money. It's organized theft on a massive scale. So to say that the government is protecting our property rights, but at the same time they're encroaching on them, I think there's a bit of a contradiction there. Uh, as
Not,
for
not
as for the second part of your question, how do you know what owns what? I guess you would have like a registry, just like you have now.
right, but first, the government actually right now does have that registry, and second, yes, the government does take your property in taxation, but that still doesn't negate the fact that they also protect your property. It's two different functions, so you can't say it's 20 to the right and 30 to the left, therefore it's 10 to the left. No, it's different functions.
Why can't you? That's that's how it works. If you go 20 to the right and 30 to the left, you end up 10 to the left.
No, I'm saying it's not analogous to that.
Oh, it's not. Okay. Um,
Yes.
and as for, the government protecting your property rights, um, so you would still privatize the services that the government are providing that are actually good. In this case, I guess it would be police or however they're protecting your property rights in the first place. The land registry. You would have a private land registry.
Right. I do want to yeah, I do want to follow up on this. So basically, in no government, everything would have to be privatized or a form of charity.
Right.
Everything would not have to be done by the government. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about how you would privatize these things.
Okay.
Um, providing healthcare to poor people, providing education to poor people, providing roads and police force to poor people. Uh, Making sure that uh, everyone's property is protected. What is the private solution to that?
Um, so, all right. So, as I said earlier, we were talking about education. You could have some scholarships or charity. Basically, it would all come down to charity, right? If they can't afford it themselves, then you have charity or they go without. Sure. Um, it's not a utopian system. Obviously, not everybody is gonna live in a mansion and eat New York strip for dinner. But historically, we've seen that markets are vastly superior to the command economy. And while that's true on a macro level, you compare North Korea with South Korea, West Germany with East Germany. It's also true on the level of individual industries. So the market economy is vastly superior. If you look at societies that were the most libertarian, the most laissez-faire, for example, United States, during the end of the 19th century, Hong Kong during the post World War II era, you see that standards of living, not only for the elite who do well in any system, but for the poorest of the poor and everyone in between, were skyrocketing at a rate that has never been matched by any other society. So if you want to ask what is the best system for the poor, historically it's been laissez-faire, and anarcho-capitalism is essentially laissez-faire, just taken a little further.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the US in the end of the 1800s was laissez-faire. For example, we had public schools, we had government, we had a military, we had anti-monopoly laws were introduced later, but we had a government, basically government held the registry of all the land in the world, not all the land in the world, all the land in the US. There were a lot of things that government did at the time. I mean, 3% of GDP. Let's see, the US economy is currently $20 trillion. So that would be $600 billion in spending. That's a lot of money.
Well, it's not even what you spend on the military, right?
Right, but it's a lot more than zero, is my point.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you look at the societies that have been the most libertarian, then you see incredible results for the poor. So if you want to ask what is the best system for the poor, it's libertarianism. It's laissez-faire. That is what worked the best in the past, and that is what will work the best in the future.
All right, we'll go back to the US example. Um,
Yeah, but
in the
may I
US,
add one thing? I think, sorry, I think, libertarian ideas are not utopian, but I could definitely say there wasn't any country 100% libertarian, the same as there wasn't any country in the world that was 100% socialist.
No, but during the 19th
yeah,
century, libertarianism, known then as liberalism, was a mass movement. We had the votes. It was everywhere. It was, all over Europe, North America. Everybody was a libertarian, and the result was, the flourishing of Western civilization.
let me ask you this, Zach, then what if people wanted that, why isn't that the case today?
Because ideas are extremely powerful, good ideas and bad ideas. So the idea of socialism, of interventionism, of welfareism, those were powerful ideas, and so they came to be. But it doesn't mean it's better. It's just um, just because it comes after doesn't mean it's better. It's just the ideas
Right.
became more prevalent.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah,
but
yeah.
the problem is, both systems are fighting against the government. The non-existence of this government, and both of the system are when it comes to controlling society. Because we are people, we are individuals. Both system are not really qualified to answer how people gonna control each other, how society is going to control each other. That's the main problem. That's why I said that libertarianism are not 100% existed, as same as socialism never been implemented to 100%.
Ye-
So
ye- Yeah. Uh, Zach, I do just want to ask you one thing. Because I know some libertarians do believe this. Do you think the government is fundamentally immoral?
Yes.
So the premise is that we live in an immoral world,
No, the premise is that the state is a criminal organization.
but in all land in the world, there is currently a state.
Yeah.
So therefore, do we live in an immoral world?
No, I think most people are fundamentally good. The vast majority, I would say. So I don't think we live in an immoral world because the most people are good. But I believe the state is a criminal organization because it obtains revenue through coercion, extortion.
Uh, all right. So I do just want to ask you, I know there's some, some people, especially capitalists, will say, you basically get to vote with your dollars. Would you generally agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
So, all right then. So in that case, I do want to ask you, why doesn't you went back to the moral principle? A always should have the same rights as B. B should always have the same rights as A. Um, I want to ask you, how is that actually practical in a libertarian society where the poor people, the only way they have to get healthcare, education, or even something like transportation or police is through charity?
Well, they can work jobs, right?
Yes, they probably are working a job, but there's no minimum wage, and they might only be making $6 an hour.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, some people have more than others. That's not necessarily immoral because wealth is created, right? So I consider it just that the
No, I
people who created that wealth have it. I consider it unjust if the state is to redistribute the wealth from the people who created it to those who played no part in its creation.
no, I'm not saying that some people having more than others is unjust. I'm saying that providing a society where the only way someone can get basic services is through charity seems somewhat unjust.
Well, I consider it unjust for the state to threaten people with violence to get their money to provide stuff for the poor. I consider that unjust. I don't consider it unjust for somebody to be poor and not be able to afford to buy stuff because that's the natural condition of man, right? But the fact is,
I mean, I mean, I,
go ahead.
I'm not sure that's necessarily the natural condition today because we've already agreed that almost all land in the world is controlled by a government.
But that's the
So,
natural condition of man. If you're alone on an island, right? You have no health care, no education. That's man. That's the natural state of things. Is for you to have nothing. When you're born into the
but
world, you're
we,
naked, you're poor.
but we don't live on an island. We both live in a country with millions of people that has a government. So right now, the natural condition is not, just no government.
Well, it's not the natural condition. That's the condition we're born into, but it's not natural, right? It's an artificial development.
So then would abolishment of government be an artificial development?
Well, I mean, whether it's natural or artificial is not the point. The point is that the state is a criminal
No, no, no.
organization, and so the only moral means of organizing society is one where people interact voluntarily, where like we all believe in consent,
Zach,
right?
Zach,
Yeah, go ahead.
yes, I
Uh,
don't agree. Zach, you raised the issue of criminality.
Yeah,
Right now, who gets to decide who is a criminal?
sure. The government decides at the moment.
Yes. So how can you be so sure that who is a criminal and who is not a criminal would be the same under anarcho-capitalism?
Well, you'd have a codified system of laws as decided upon by philosophers, basically. It's all
uh,
yeah.
uh, Zach, I have a question for you. How libertarians, not libertarians, anarcho-capitalists are what they think about nationality,
I'm
what
for
they
I'm
think
for
about
open borders.
huh?
Open
What they
borders.
think? So they will be borders, right?
No.
Okay. So do you think that what we are people? It's natural. So you talk about the unnatural things, but when we look our natural, yeah, some species are. about they designed to live a lot, yeah, to be, you know, stray. I don't know how to call it, but they designed to be alone and hunt a lot. But we are people. We were society orientated from begin, isn't it?
I'm sorry,
And
I
I
don't.
mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
and by that I mean we are social society orientated. Don't you think that one group of people will make their circle and become strong one and oppress other people, and in that case making some kind of government or some kind of
Yeah.
monopolies?
Look, if the worst thing you can say
Yes,
about anarchy is that a government's going to result, then I think that's an argument in favor of anarchy.
no, I would actually disagree with that. I would say the worst thing about anarchy is that it is so bad that a government has to form. For example, why would it, if anarchy is great, why would a government form? I mean, it's because the people wanted one or because there was power to create it.
Yeah, well, I don't think you would have that problem. I mean, once we abolish the state, if we have a narco-capitalist society that does abolish the state, the people would resist any government. And somebody tried to form one, it just wouldn't take, right? Or maybe it would, and you'd end up with a
Not
government again. It's not.
necessarily. Let me ask you, Zach, what percentage of Canadians are anarcho-capitalists?
I would say probably less than 1%.
So I don't think it is reasonable that people would oppose a government forming again.
Yeah,
But
but
I
that's
do
in
have a,
Canada today, right? If an anarcho-capitalist society formed, probably you would have the vast majority being anarcho-capitalists.
Zach, I have a
and
question again for you. Sorry, hi, Lucian. Because this question is about when you contradict with any capitalist, right? They always say that socialism and communism is not natural, right? So, do you agree with this statement?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
Okay,
it's not
so
important, right? Because natural is not necessarily a good thing. The natural thing is for 1 in 3 women to die in childbirth, right? That's
yeah,
natural,
yeah, yeah, I agree
so
with that, but what is a better when you have you know we people we tend to build up foundation by something was built before, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a foundation as our, the problem is we are people, but we have a feelings and we have some kind of hormones, and you are not able to control that. We always tends to be grouped, always tends to group. We
I'm not
always tends
opposed
to
to
group.
society. I'm opposed to the state. They're just different things.
Yeah, but if you are grouped by society, but by nature there will be a laws arise and some kind of form of the law, because you need to control
yeah,
those people. Like if you don't control, you have a problem.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah, I would
agree.
agree with that.
But I think you can still have law without having the state.
Yeah,
So
but the
then,
problem,
so that,
uh,
yeah, go on.
and then, but the problem is if you are, uh, the problem is we still have a problem of the transaction. We need to buy and eat, right?
Uh-huh.
And and uh, what is the main problem is when I see the anarcho is that we still have a responsibility for our people, for our society. You cannot just step down by society and just say, oh, if you are poor, you stay poor. Because the problem is, the problem is, if there is a majority of people are poor, they're gonna kill you. It doesn't matter how many arms do you have. They're gonna kill you, and they're gonna, it's like a kind of natural. Revolutions, mostly just a communist revolutions, happens because there is a sheer amount of people which became poor. And if you don't care about poor, they are tend to group as a poor, and some days there will be a smart person or super person, which points you are looking for, and they're gonna kill you because they want to eat, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I would actually agree with that.
Well, I would say that communist revolutions probably occur not necessarily because of poverty, but because the idea of communism becomes prevalent. I think that ideas are the main force in shaping history.
No-
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I would just say not even a communist revolution, but people who want, maybe there's, 1,000 poor people who live together, not even live together, but live in the same area. They don't, for some reason, a charity, or maybe just rich people don't want to do it. A charity won't give them health care. What prevents them from coming to a rich guy's house and taking all of his stuff?
But even
Why
if
Yeah,
wouldn't
it's
that happen in an
even
anarcho-capitalist society?
look, even if it's true
yeah.
that poverty leads to revolution and the poor killing the rich, well, the best way to alleviate poverty is through laissez-faire, through libertarianism. That's how it
No,
was
no,
most
but
effectively
No,
alleviated in the
no,
past.
the
no,
problem
because
is,
you just,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
go
Wait,
ahead.
wait a minute. Hydrogen. No, the problem is, Azad. Do you understand? People are, as you can you look at the corporation. Why those kind of inflation happens? Some people say it's because greed. Greeds are exist, and it's natural because you know we always need to count people's natural points. So we should count as a tendency to become more grouped and tendency to be greedy. And you know, sometimes revolution happens not because they want to eat, but because some people want more than just being fed, and that's the bigger problem. And the problem is in anarchy capitalism, there is existence of capitalism because capitalism is not about bringing people from poor to, you know, to rich.
I disagree. I think
No,
that's
I mean,
exactly what capitalism is about.
no, no,
But
no, no.
and that,
Sorry, but
oh, sorry.
disagree with you. I just want to point one thing. I stress one thing. Not poor as become, you have a food. Okay, you will have a food, right?
You know,
Look at the people in USA. Do you think poor people are not able to go work and eat that by the food themselves, feed themselves? No, they are able to. But the problem is disparities are so much big that people are not when they are not really happy that they only have a feed, they only have a food, they want more because they see that the world are capable of even that thing. So the problem is people want same things, greediness. They want other they want own same things or as other people's does. So that's the main problem.
Yeah, yes, and I do want to. There's actually a scientific study that I do know that was conducted on this. Basically, they gave people $100 and said, offer an amount to the other player and offer amount to yourselves, and you guys both have to agree if you get anything. Well, when people would take $90 for themselves and give 10 to the other person, even though if they accepted it, they would get $10. If they rejected it, they would get zero. They almost always rejected it, even though it would be in their economic best interest to accept that, because people have some concept of fairness. The second thing I would like to point out is I actually just Googled this. I'm looking at the screenshots right now. In 1870, that's kind of before the Gilded Age that you're talking about, the poverty rate was 45% in the United States. In 1900, 30 years later, in this laissez-faire world, the poverty rate was 56%. The poverty rate actually went up 11% during the time that you're talking about, 1870 to 1900.
Yeah, but the poverty
So
rate statistics are like they don't measure absolute poverty, they measure relative poverty. So even if things are going up, but it's unequal, poverty can increase even though people will become less poor. So I always take these poverty statistics with a grain of salt.
well, do you have another statistic that shows I'm wrong?
Well, no, I mean I
Bec-
haven't looked into it, right? I'd have to look at what you're looking at and no, I can't refute this one particular thing that
Right.
I haven't looked at right off the top of my head. But if you look at poverty statistics in general, and you look at like what they're calling poor in America, it's like middle class in Europe because they're comparing, okay, yes, there's billionaires who have way more money, but what you should really be looking
But
at is absolute wealth. It doesn't really matter if there's a couple guys with $1 billion. What matters is your standard of living.
Zach, that's why I just gave the example of that scientific experiment. That's not necessarily how humans think.
Well,
For
okay, let me
example,
ask you a question. Would you
and
rather have $1,000 a year and everybody else in your society has $1,000 a year? Or would you rather have $30,000 a year, but there's a bunch of billionaires? Obviously, it's absolute wealth that matters, not relative wealth.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Zach. I totally agree with you, Zach. Uh, but the problem is, yeah, people sometimes they are not rational as your point of view. They want a little bit more than they just have. So the problem is anarcho-capitalism. In my opinion, what's the problem of the anarcho-capitalism? Okay, we don't have a problem with the policies. We don't have a problem with the implementing law, but the discrepancy, the difference level of poverty and richness. So I think in anarcho-capitalism, that will be disasters. Level different difference level of the poverty. So that will eventually lead to coup, revolutions, war, and so on. So in that case, both sides they will group to the army to protect themselves, and both sides will be right.
But I don't think there's really any historical example of that occurring as a result of, laissez-faire libertarian policies. Um,
So
uh,
can you again? Can you name a country? You said that one country had a really good libertarian history, like they have a kind of a anarcho-capitalism.
Yeah, I think there's three examples in relatively recent times, which is Hong Kong in the post World War II era, which was the most economically free country for quite a long time. Per capita income increased 100% or 100-fold uh,
Hmm.
during the 50 years past post World War II, because they had a tradition of laissez-faire, free trade, non-intervention. And so the other example is America during the Gilded Age. I would say very very libertarian, very laissez-faire, strong economic growth, strong increases in wages across the board. And then the third example which I think is very important, is Botswana, because obviously, if you care about the world, you care about poor countries and people in poor countries becoming rich, you want that to happen, then it's helpful to examine a country where that did occur. Botswana was an extremely poor country, and as a result, they had this fiscal austerity where basically they would never let the government spend any money. Then they got the diamond wealth, and because they had that fiscal austerity, they were able to finance the whole government off diamonds, and they became very prosperous as a result. Um,
Zach, which years of Hong Kong is that the
Basically,
same year when
50 years after 1945.
1945?
In 1995, that time period.
Mm, okay, so how about US? Which time? Which period?
Yeah, the Gilded Age. So late 19th century.
Okay, so how about I'm not very sure, but I'm pretty sure that golden age that was in the
Gilded
golden age.
Age.
Yeah, so in that age, there was a lot of how they called. I mean, African people when they used them as a labor. I
Slavery.
forgot the word. Huh?
Slavery.
Yeah, slavery. Yeah.
No, slavery was abolished. What? 60s, 1860s. I don't know. I don't know my U.S. history that
There
great.
what there what we did have a period of Jim Crow, which was basically segregation, and especially in the South, it wasn't slave labor, but it was sharecropping, which was pretty close to slave labor. So yes, during the 1870s to 1900s, there was a lot of um, racial inequity in America.
Yeah, no
Yeah, I
question. I
agree,
mean,
but yeah, go on. That was a really good conversation, guys. Sorry for my poor English.
no, I thought you had a lot of great questions actually, and your English is not so bad. It's a lot better than what's your natural language? Paruski?
Yeah, по-русски.
Yeah, it's a lot better than my Paruski.
Uh, yeah,
The great.
yeah.
So yeah, the but you know, I, as a leftist, I mean, it's after I mean, as a leftist, anarcho-capitalism is a good thing for me, but except capitalism, because yeah, if you can prove that it works, and if it works, okay, I'm with that. But the problem is, anarcho-capitalism, in my opinion, is not so far from fascism, but in different way. Like if you are poor, you're not able to live up, then you are poor and you need to die. And I mean, this it could be advocated in this way, in my opinion, but I don't know. Like,
Yeah, I
sorry,
think yeah, I think yeah, I think I this has been informing. I actually don't know that much about anarcho-capitalism. Now I know some more.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thank you guys both for the discussion. I hope that it was enjoyable for you guys. I thought you both
yeah,
had a lot of great points.
yeah. Thank you very much, guys. I think the conversation would be better if I wasn't here,
No, I
because
know.
I
I
interrupted you.
guarantee it would have been worse. I guarantee it.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you
you're
very much.
good.
Yeah.
All right. Yep.
Yeah. See you guys. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
But